The room is electric, cameras blinking like restless eyes, whispers coiling through marble walls. Headline banners explode across the nation. Bill Barr, Crockett lied to America. The words pulse in crimson, echoing through every feed, every living room, every partisan heartbeat. Inside the chamber, Jasmine Crockett sits perfectly still. Her hands rest on a folder thick with truth, her gaze fixed forward, calm, deliberate, unreadable. Across from her, Bill Barr leans back, confident, lips curling into that familiar smirk of power unchallenged. The narrator's voice cuts through the tension, low and deliberate. He thought he could bury her with accusations. But what she pulled out next buried his credibility instead. A camera flash sears white. The air feels heavier now, like everyone knows something irreversible is about to happen. Her breath steadies. The chair creaks. Silence stretches so thin it hums. What could possibly silence a man like Barr? The master of spin, the architect of half-truths. The clock ticks once, twice. She opens the folder, and just before the first word leaves her lips, the narrator whispers, fading into darkness. To understand how it came to this moment, we need to rewind to the accusation that sparked the storm. The storm didn't start in the chamber. It began with a soundbite. A clipped, rehearsed voice from a TV studio. Bill Barr, smirking behind the safety of polished lighting. Representative Crockett fabricated her numbers, he declared. Completely false. There's no racial bias in federal prosecutions. The words spread like gasoline meeting spark. Within hours, cable networks looped the clip on repeat. Panels formed overnight. Pundits in pressed suits leaned forward, eyes gleaming with certainty. She exaggerated for attention, one said. It's dangerous to invent facts, another insisted. The verdict was swift, not from a court, but from a chorus of talking heads echoing a lie. On social media, hashtags split the nation in two. Hashtag Crockett Lies trended beside hashtag Stand with Jasmine. News alerts flooded timelines, feeding the spectacle while draining the substance. It wasn't just about statistics anymore. It was about power deciding who gets to define reality. The narrator's voice slides in, steady as a heartbeat. But beneath the noise, there was something Barr hadn't counted on. Crockett's receipts. Because while the outrage machine spun, Crockett went silent. Not defeated, but calculating. Each day she stayed quiet. The tension grew. Commentators mistook her silence for weakness. They forgot. Silence can be strategy. This wasn't merely a political clash. It was cultural combat, a test of who owns the narrative. Barr had the establishment, the microphones, the megaphones of privilege. Crockett had something rarer, documentation, proof that refused to flinch. The narrator lingers on the contrast. He wielded reputation. She wielded reality. Every whisper against her wasn't just an attack on one congresswoman. It was an attempt to police credibility itself, to remind America who's allowed to be believed and who isn't. But there's a pattern here. The narrator continues, his tone dipping into something darker. Barr's tactic, discredit, distort, delay, wasn't new. It was a blueprint sharpened over decades, from Mueller to the media circuit. And yet, the voice fades into a low hum. This wasn't the first time Bill Barr had played this game. A pause. His history? It's where the Ray story begins. Bill Barr's legacy was never built on honesty. It was engineered on precision. The precision of what not to say. The precision of what could sound like truth, even when it wasn't. Flashback, the Mueller report. Cameras flicker across the Department of Justice seal as Barr steps up to the podium, his tone measured, his face unreadable. The report found no collusion, he announced. 3 words, enough to rewrite the headlines before anyone could read the 400 pages that followed. The truth didn't die that day. It was suffocated under semantics. He'd mastered the art of the plausible untruth. Sentences constructed like legal armor, each word chosen to survive scrutiny while betraying substance. When questioned later, he'd shrug, smile, and say, I never said that exactly. It was always technically accurate, always misunderstood by the media. And with every shrug, accountability slipped a little further away. The narrator's voice deepens, almost clinical. Every time he spoke, headlines shifted. Every time he shrugged, accountability slipped further away. Montage. Barr sitting across from journalists, unbothered. Barr testifying before Congress, smirking as senators struggled to corner him. Barr walking past protesters holding signs that read, "No one is above the law." But power protects itself, and Barr was its architect. Behind the calm voice was a man who had spent decades polishing the machinery of plausible denial. He knew how to weaponize confusion, to make truth seem partisan and deception seem complex. When the Justice Department faced questions about systemic bias, Barr's response was textbook. "I don't think the data supports that claim," he said, dismissing years of studies and lived experience with a single sentence. For millions watching, it wasn't just bureaucratic deflection, it was personal erasure. The narrator slows, turning intimate. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to threaten. He just needed to redefine reality, one soundbite at a time. In another era, that strategy might have worked forever. The suited man with the careful voice, cloaked in credibility, speaking over the people most affected by his decisions. But something in the air had changed. America was no longer content to listen. It was watching, recording, remembering. Each selective omission, each smirk, each polished denial. They had formed a pattern. And patterns, once seen, can't be unseen. The narrator recalls one moment that defined him. A press conference where a reporter asked about racial disparities in sentencing. Barr looked directly at her and said, "I think people make too much of that issue." The phrase landed like stone. The clip went viral for a day, forgotten the next. But the harm lingered, invisible, measurable, undeniable. Because behind every deflection was a policy. Behind every euphemism, a community that paid the price. And that is how Barr survived for decades. Not by lying outright, but by telling truths too small to matter. Power doesn't always shout, the narrator murmurs. Sometimes it smiles. By the time his accusation against Jasmine Crockett hit the airwaves, it was just another move in a well-worn playbook. Discredit the critic. Flood the noise. Let the system bury nuance under fatigue. But this time, the pattern met resistance. The man who once silenced movements with soundbites was about to face someone who understood the value of silence and how to weaponize it. The narrator's tone sharpens, the rhythm tightening like a drum before a battle. He played this game before against journalists, prosecutors, even presidents. But this time, the target wasn't just another critic. A pause, long enough for breath and disbelief. It was Jasmine Crockett, and she wasn't playing defense. Long before the cameras, before the headlines, before the echo of applause and outrage, there was a young attorney in a small Dallas courtroom, exhausted, underpaid, and unbreakable. Jasmine Crockett stood before a judge defending a man who couldn't afford anyone else. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The prosecutor towered across the aisle. And still, her voice never trembled. She didn't speak to impress. She spoke to protect. That was her classroom. Not Harvard, not Yale, but the concrete floors and chaotic mornings of the public defender's office. Every file on her desk told a story that power had already decided wasn't worth telling. But she told them anyway. She learned that in America, truth doesn't win by accident. It wins because someone is stubborn enough to stand behind it, even when the world's already moved on. Years later, as the world finally learned her name, the habits from those days never left her. She still prepared the same way, quietly, methodically, with the calm of someone who knows storms pass but records remain. The narrator leans in, the tone soft but resolute. She learned early that truth needs armor, not anger. Clips flash through time. Crockett at rallies, in hearings on panels. Always measured, always unbothered. Reporters called her sharp, opponents called her too calm, but she never took the bait. Her rule was simple. Never shout, just show. When colleagues tried to warn her that politics rewards performance, she smiled. "I'm not here for the show," she said. "I'm here for the receipts." Each victory came with a scar. Online smears, coded insults, pundits painting her confidence as arrogance. But the more they talked, the more she refined her silence. Every insult only proved her point. That power panics when truth doesn't flinch. She carried herself like someone who'd already been underestimated too many times to care anymore. Every motion she filed, every question she asked, was layered with the... On social media, hashtags split the nation in two. Hashtag Crockett Lies trended beside hashtag Stand with Jasmine. News alerts flooded timelines, feeding the spectacle while draining the substance. It wasn't just about statistics anymore. It was about power deciding who gets to define reality. The narrator's voice slides in, steady as a heartbeat. But beneath the noise, there was something Barr hadn't counted on: Crockett's receipts. Because while the outrage machine spun, Crockett went silent. Not defeated, but calculating. Each day she stayed quiet. The tension grew. Commentators mistook her silence for weakness. They forgot silence can be strategy. This wasn't merely a political clash. It was cultural combat, a test of who owns the narrative. Barr had the establishment, the microphones, the megaphones of privilege. Crockett had something rarer: documentation, proof that refused to flinch. The narrator lingers on the contrast. He wielded reputation. She wielded reality. Every whisper against her wasn't just an attack on one congresswoman. It was an attempt to police credibility itself, to remind America who's allowed to be believed and who isn't. But there's a pattern here. The narrator continues, his tone dipping into something darker. Barr's tactic, discredit, distort, delay, wasn't new. It was a blueprint sharpened over decades, from Mueller to the media circuit. And yet, the voice fades into a low hum. This wasn't the first time Bill Barr had played this game. A pause. His history? It's where the Rayall story begins. The hearing room hums with quiet hostility, that kind of silence that feels louder than shouting. Cameras swivel. Flashbulbs pop. Every journalist in the room knows they're seconds away from a viral moment. Bill Barr leans forward, his tone wrapped in practice calm, the kind that pretends to be polite while sharpening its edges. Representative Crockett, he begins, I stand by what I said. You fabricated those numbers. There is no systemic bias in federal prosecutions. None. He lets the word none linger in the air, savoring its finality. A few heads nod behind him. Crockett doesn't move. Her gaze stays fixed, her hands folded lightly on the table. Mr. Barr, she says evenly, are you sure you want that on record? The sentence lands like glass breaking underwater. Quiet, but impossible to ignore. The room goes still. A senator coughs. A reporter's pen freezes mid-scratch. Even the air conditioner seems to pause. The narrator's voice slices through the tension. The room went cold. Cameras zoomed in. America held its breath. Barr tilts his head, feigning confusion. Of course, he replies, a smirk tugging at his lip. I'm sure, because facts are stubborn things. A ripple of low laughter from his allies follows, too loud, too certain. The kind of confidence that comes from never having been truly challenged. But Crockett's expression doesn't shift. Not anger, not surprise, just that same composed focus, the calm before a controlled detonation. The narrator leans in. He thought it was another performance. Another moment he could dominate with volume and authority. Crockett takes a breath. Her fingers slide across the folder before her, the one no one else has seen yet. Inside, pages wait, time-stamped, verified, irrefutable. Barr continues talking, stacking words like sandbags against the flood he doesn't see coming. Each sentence sounds certain until it doesn't. He'd built a career on controlling the conversation. The narrator murmurs. But in that moment, he didn't realize the conversation had already shifted. Crockett looks up, eyes steady. Good, she says softly. Then let's talk about facts. The air tightens. Every lens focuses on her. Because what she was about to reveal, the narrator warns, would turn confidence into silence. Crockett doesn't rush. She opens the folder like a ritual, slow and deliberate, the soft rustle of paper cutting through the still air. The cameras catch every movement. Her fingers find the first document, edges crisp, official letterhead gleaming beneath the fluorescent light. Mr. Barr, she begins, voice steady. This is a Department of Justice internal report, dated March 12, 2023. It states, and I quote, that black defendants in federal cases face statistically significant disparities in charging and sentencing compared to white defendants for similar offenses. She lets the sentence hang, her tone flat, surgical. The sound of truth, not theater. Barr blinks. Just once. A subtle crack in the mask. Crockett turns the page. Here's another. The Sentencing Commission's annual data summary, signed by your own appointee, noting identical findings. Would you like me to read the percentages, or should we assume you've memorized them? No one breathes. The crowd behind the cameras seems frozen, watching a duel where one side just realized they brought a speech to a gunfight. She continues, voice calm as ever. This memo, also from your tenure, outlines a review of internal bias training within the DOJ. It was marked as insufficient. You signed the acknowledgement yourself. The narrator enters, quiet but sharp. She didn't debate. She documented. She didn't accuse, she proved. Barr's smile falters just slightly. He shifts in his chair, reaching for his water glass. The room tilts, metaphorically and almost physically, as control slips from his grasp. Crockett's eyes remain on her papers. For the record, every source I cited was drawn directly from your department's own public archives. Nothing fabricated, nothing misrepresented. Unless, of course, you'd like to call the DOJ's data a lie too. A whisper ripples through the audience, soft gasps, a stifled chuckle, a single dam caught by a microphone. Barr opens his mouth, but no sound follows. He looks less like a man testifying and more like a man cornered by his own record. Crockett closes the folder with a faint thud that echoes louder than any gavel. Her voice doesn't rise. It doesn't need to. She leans slightly toward the microphone, eyes locked on Barr. Next time someone calls a black woman a liar, she says, make sure she doesn't have the evidence sitting in her binder. Silence. Not polite silence. Seismic silence. The kind that hums through the bones of the room. Even the cameras hesitate, unsure whether to cut or stay. Barr stares down, eyes darting to the folder, as though searching for a version of reality where those documents don't exist. There isn't one. The narrator returns, voice low, reverent. He came armed with accusation. She came armed with proof. And proof doesn't flinch. Then it happens. A soft murmur from the press row, swelling into a rustle of disbelief and awe. A single audible gasp breaks through, caught perfectly on camera. The moment is cinematic, but unforced, justice performing itself. Within minutes, the footage floods the internet. Clips loop on repeat, each replay slower than the last, zooming on Barr's changing expression, on Crockett's composure, on the final line that detonated across timelines like scripture. Make sure she doesn't have the evidence sitting in her binder. Twitter erupts. Hashtags ignite. Hashtag receipts over rhetoric. Hashtag Crockett proved it. Hashtag truth has receipts. News anchors scramble to rewrite segments. Op-eds begin forming mid-broadcast. Legal scholars call it a factual takedown of historic precision. Commentators who once doubted her tweet's sudden respect disguised as surprise. Barr's allies retreat into silence, issuing statements about context and misinterpretation. But the internet has already made its verdict. The truth is time-stamped, replayed, immortalized. Crockett doesn't gloat. No es might, no es mute. She gathers her papers, stacks them neatly, and says nothing more. The power isn't in the punch, it's in the pause. The narrator lingers, voice almost hushed. In that silence, reputations cracked, narratives collapsed, and somewhere between accusation and evidence, dignity won. The screen fades to black. Then, softly, but the moment didn't end in that room. The internet took it further, and Barr's reputation never recovered. The clip hits social media before the hearing even adjourns. Within minutes, timelines ignite, the sound of Crockett's voice echoing across millions of screens. Next time someone calls a black woman a liar, pause. Make sure she doesn't have the evidence sitting in her binder. It becomes a mantra, a meme, a movement. Hashtags bloom like wildfire. Hashtag Crockett proved it. Hashtag receipts over rhetoric. Hashtag dignity wins. Edits roll out. Split screens of Barr's stunned face beside Crockett's calm defiance. One tweet reads, "She didn't raise her voice once. She didn't have to." It racks up 1 million likes in a day. On TikTok, creators dissect her tone, her control, her timing. Jasmine Crockett just gave a masterclass in controlled power, says one commentator, eyes wide, voice reverent. That's how you dismantle arrogance, with data and grace. Another creator plays the clip in slow motion, overlaying the words receipts rhetoric. Every time, cable networks catch up hours later, scrambling to package what the internet already declared history. Analysts use phrases like strategic brilliance, factual elegance, and the new face of political composure. Even those who once dismissed her can't deny the precision of what unfolded. The narrator cuts through the noise. For a man who'd shaped narratives for decades, he'd finally met a truth that didn't bend. Barr's office issues a brief, sterile statement, no comment at this time. His once reliable media allies go quiet. No interviews, no tweets. The silence is louder than any denial could be. Meanwhile, Crockett's composure becomes cultural shorthand. Late-night hosts reference pulling a Crockett, meaning to drop truth so cleanly that arrogance collapses under its own weight. Editorials flood in. Composure is the new rebellion. But beyond the memes and media frenzy, something deeper hums beneath the surface, a generational shift. Young activists share the clip, not just for the takedown, but for what it represents, a new kind of leadership. One that doesn't chase spectacle, but commands it through truth. The narrator's tone softens, reflective. It wasn't just a viral moment. It was a recalibration, a reminder that integrity still stings, that calm is still revolutionary. In community centers, classrooms, and online forums, her words are quoted like scripture. Truth doesn't shout. One professor tells her students, it stands. The camera drifts over screens, phones glowing in dark rooms, faces lit with the shared recognition of something real. And yet, the narrator adds, voice dropping to a near whisper, what Crockett said afterward revealed this was never about vengeance. It was about legacy. Fade to black. The music fades to a low, pulsing heartbeat. The audience leans forward, waiting to hear what she said next. The hearing room is empty now. Echoes of the day still hanging in the air. Cameras have packed up, pundits have moved on, but Jasmine Crockett lingers for a moment, her binder still in hand. A reporter catches her as she's leaving. The question is soft, almost reverent. Congresswoman, how did you stay so calm when you were being accused like that? She smiles, not triumphant, not smug, just steady. Facts aren't emotional, she says. They're eternal. The narrator's voice returns, quieter now, thoughtful. In an era where lies travel faster than truth, Crockett reminded us that composure can still carry the day. Cut to montage. News anchors dissecting the exchange, social clips replaying her words, but now the sound fades beneath the narrator's reflection. She didn't humiliate him. She humbled the culture. Every frame feels slower, more deliberate, a pause for something bigger than politics. She proved that calm is the loudest form of power, that when dignity meets deceit, it doesn't need to raise its voice, it only needs to hold its ground. Across America, her moment becomes more than a headline. Teachers play the clip in civics classes. Parents show it to their daughters. Commentators call it a reset for public discourse. But those who watched closely saw something deeper, a woman refusing to let arrogance rewrite reality. For years, people like Barr mastered the art of distortion, the half-truth dressed as reason. But Crockett showed that documentation still defeats performance, and integrity still disarms intimidation. Her quiet victory is both personal and collective, a reminder of what truth sounds like when stripped of theatrics. Truth doesn't shout. Integrity doesn't flinch. Evidence doesn't die. The camera follows her as she walks down the marble hallway, the hum of her heels echoing like punctuation marks. A beam of late-afternoon light cuts across the corridor, catching her silhouette as she steps forward. Binder tucked under her arm, head high, pace unhurried. The narrator's voice grows softer, more intimate, almost like a benediction. She came to that hearing armed with nothing but proof and poise. And when she walked out, she carried something far heavier. The weight of every person who's ever been told their truth didn't matter. A final pause. Music swells, strings slow and resolute. In the end, it wasn't just a political moment. It was a reminder that truth may be interrupted, but it never disappears. Fade out on Crockett's silhouette stepping into the light. A single heartbeat of silence. Then, the narrator's closing whisper. Calm as power. Always. Bill Barr accused her of lying, but it was his legacy that collapsed under truth. In a world where arrogance still masquerades as authority, Jasmine Crockett didn't just defend herself. She redefined what power looks like. Calm, documented, unshakable. If you believe receipts speak louder than rhetoric, share this moment. Subscribe and stand with a movement that proves dignity is power and truth still wins. As soft orchestral music rises, the screen fades to black. A final caption glows across the screen. Composure is power. Truth doesn't tremble.